Okay, so without further ado, my name is Gaurav, and I'm a product manager on App Services team. Now, in next 30 minutes, what actually I'm going to talk about is how do you migrate and modernize your ASP.NET web applications using Azure App Services. So before I get into the whole modernization piece, I just quickly want to talk about how do what if I have a bunch of ASP.NET applications on-prem? How do I migrate them to app services in the first place? And there are multiple different tools which are available for you to use. And as many of you might be aware, that Azure Migrate is pretty much the centerpiece of all migration tooling when it comes to Azure today. And as part of Azure Migrate, again, we have this whole integrated experience using which you can perform like at scale discovery, assessment, and migration of your web apps. And quickly, if I talk about the whole at scale discovery, so it starts with like you downloading an appliance and configuring the appliance in your on-prem data center. So remember, the whole Azure Migrate experience is about at-scale discovery, assessment, and migration of your web apps. And by at-scale, it could even be your entire data center. So talking of which, currently from a tech stack point of view, we support ASP.NET and Java Tomcat web apps for at-scale discovery. And again, it's there on VMware, Hyper-V, or even physical server environment. So once you download the appliance and you configure the appliance, after that, the discovery process is pretty much automated. And what we do is we basically give you a very nice interactive dashboard of what all apps we have discovered on every individual server with some of the underlying infrastructure details. Once the discovery is done, the next step is assessment, and you as a user pretty much go ahead and define a tons of attributes that you want to assess against. And by assessment, basically what we are trying to ensure is that your web application, once you migrate it to app service, I mean, is it ready to be migrated, or is there any of the like post migration configurations that may be required? So once you have chosen the Azure region that you would want to migrate to, and maybe you required an isolated deployment using app services environment, we go ahead and kickstart the assessment, and we do a bunch of configuration check against your web app for a suitability to be migrated to app service. And what we do is we come back and give you a result in terms of apps which are ready for migration, apps which may be ready with conditions, meaning apps will get migrated, but you will definitely require some like post migration configuration changes, and then apps which are currently not ready for migration. Now, once you're done with discovery and assessment, actually it's the final step, which is the actual migration. And what we allow there is you can basically package multiple different web apps and configurations along with it, and then migrate them to app service. Now, at a time, you can like create 5 app service plans and go ahead and migrate your web applications. And as part of the whole migration flow, we also allow you to go ahead and change the suggested SKUs that we give you at the time of assessment, or if you want to turn around and change some of the packing density, which we suggested part of assessment. So yeah, all those flexibilities are there, and this is all about the at scale discovery, assessment, and migration. Moving on, what if you want to just migrate your web applications out of a single IS server? That's where you use PowerShell scripts, and this is exactly the demo I'm going to show in a little while from now. Again, the fundamental building blocks in terms of discovery, assessment, and migration are consistent across whether it's Azure Migrate at scale or it's for a single IS web server using PowerShell scripts. Now, another important point to note, especially for PowerShell scripts, is that you can even use them on, say, you already have .NET applications on Azure VMs, and you still want to move out of Azure VMs to say App Service. It's doable. Or you have a .NET application running on a cloud server service web roles. I mean, you can again use these PowerShell scripts to migrate your web application from web role to App Service. And finally, we also have this whole like wizard based experience, which is about what if I just want to like have a look and feel about what the migration means, and I just want to migrate one single web application out of my web server. That's where the standalone tool comes into the picture. So the idea here is you want to do an entire data center migration, or you want to do a single server migration, or even a single site migration. We have tools to support all different scopes. So moving on to the actual demo. So this is a classic IS server where I have a bunch of ASP.NET applications, and now I plan to migrate these to App Service, and I plan to use PowerShell scripts. So basically, the idea here is that you download once you download the script, you simply unzip the script. That's it. There is no installation required. It's just downloading and like unzipping the PowerShell scripts. Once you have these scripts ready, you can see and start executing the scripts. Again, in the interest of time, what I've done is I've just got some of these commands simplified so that
Can we zoom
now
in
what the
just a little
first
bit so
command.
we can see these?
Okay.
If that's possible, that would be great.
Let me try and increase the font further. I hope this helps.
Awesome. That's super awesome. Thanks.
Yes. Thank you. So now what is happening behind the scene, as you can see, basically what the PowerShell script is doing, it talks to the IS server, and then it runs a host of readiness checks against every single website that we had on the IS server, and that comes back and gives me different errors or warnings against every single check. Now, if you see for one of the site, it's telling me that there is basically a framework or a TCP port check which has failed, because you remember Azure App Service allows incoming traffic only on HTTP and HTTPS. Now I had one of these site intentionally which was running on TCP. So basically that's not a site which is ready for migration. So moving on to the next step, once I have pretty much the readiness available for my PowerShell script, what I do next is I go ahead and create a package. Now, what's happening behind the scene is all the web applications which were reported as ready or ready with conditions will be basically packaged. And by packaging, what's happening here is we will package the content and the configuration of your web apps. And then in the final step, we will basically go ahead and kickstart the migration of these applications. So let's give it a few seconds. Yes. So now I have the package ready. And finally, what I do is go ahead and start the migration. Oh, it's still packaging the final site. And the time it takes also depends on the content size. Remember, we support up to 2 gigs of content that can be zipped and deployed to your app service. If you have larger content, I am going to come to that in a little while when we talk about modernization features. But yes, there are ways that we can help you deploy larger content sizes as well. So I'll just wait for this to finish. Yes, and it's done. Now, finally, what I'm doing is I am starting the migration. So how this whole thing starts, it will start creating an app service plan behind the scene. And once the app service plan is created, it would basically go ahead and then create a web app and then finally copy the content over and deploy it to the app. this is the resource group where shortly we'll see a plan being created. I mean, this might take a few seconds. So in the interest of time, what I did, I already migrated a web app using the same PowerShell scripts, and that's the web app for you. Now, again, remember the web app that I am showing you currently on the screen also has a database attached to it. And for database migration, you can use, I mean, like it's very common for ASP.NET applications to have, say, a SQL database in the backend. I mean, there are enough tools available from Microsoft for you to migrate your SQL databases over to Azure SQL or managed instances. I mean, whatever you decide to use. So once you have that, I also want to show you something very, very simple. So it's very common for us to define our connection strings in the web.config in the similar fashion that you have on the screen. Now, the first step in modernization that I would want to call out here, which is like pretty simple but super powerful, is you go to my web app, and if you go to configuration, I could actually move. So if you see what I've done here is I basically created a connection string using the configuration options for my web app. What this allows me to do is this basically lets me move my connection string out of the web.config as an environment variable. Now, the big benefit for an environment variable approach here is that if I want to change my database server, if I want to connect to an entirely different server, I can make the change here and my web app will get restarted, of course, and then post that it will start talking to the new database. So basically, I'm avoiding a new deployment by using this scenario. So this is like one of the very common modernization approach that you can take, like with your not only with your connection string, maybe with your other app settings in the web.config as well. Now let's take this concept a bit further. Now over here, if you see, I have the database connection string available pretty much like in like a text form. What if I want to securely store my connection string in Azure Key Vault? Now, how do I start that? Basically, I go to Key Vault, I create a new Key Vault, I go to secrets, and I go ahead and create a new secret. Now, I've created a secret called DB connection string. And as you can see that I basically get an identifier for my secret and I have the secret enabled, and this is where the secret value exists. So this basically is your actual connection string for your database. Now it is basically available in my Key Vault. Now another important point to understand here is before I can have a Key Vault reference work with my app service, I just go back. I basically use references with my app. What I need to do is I need to make have a system managed identity available because it's basically this Azure Active Directory. Basically, it is this principal object against which I will provide access to make a call to the Azure Key Vault reference. So what happens here is, if you see, this is the managed identity that I have created, and then I go back to the Key Vault, and I go to the access policies of the Key Vault. And you can see that basically what I've done is I basically created a access policy over here where I have granted a get permission, a policy for the secret. So basically what I'm saying is that using the managed identity that I've created against my web application, I want that identity to have access to this key vault to basically list the secret or get the secret for my web application to use. Now, once this is done, what I do is I come back to my app, again go to configuration. And now I will edit the DB connection string, and instead of using the value here, what I would do is I would basically use a key vault reference. Now remember, this is the secret URI that you get that I just showed you from the key vault. And how App Service identifies that this is a key vault reference is basically you add the @ Microsoft.keyvault just before the secret URI. That is it. You say okay, you save. Behind the scene, your app would be restarted once this is done. Once I click on the URL, my app just loads. So what I have done without making any changes to the code, I have basically changed my DB connection string all the way. I moved it out all the way from my configuration, from a web.config file, stored it in a key vault securely, and then I've hooked my web application to basically use the key vault based database connection string. Similarly, if you remember, I just said about larger content sizes. Now, it is again very common that my on-prem web application is using a virtual directory. Now, as some of you might be aware, that we already have something called as bring your own storage for app services, and how that works. Again, if I go back to configuration, for some reason, my screen refresh time is taking a bit longer, so please bear with me. Yes, and if I go to path mappings, I can basically go ahead and create a new storage mount. Now, what this means is that if I have a storage account with a file share, for example, something similar to this. So this is my storage account that I have created. And what I've done within this storage account, I've actually created an Azure file share. If I go further within there, basically this is my file share where I would have just uploaded I mean, I can upload whatever content I want either manually or programmatically or using something like as easy copy. I mean, it's up to me how I move my content from on-prem to this Azure file share. Once I've done that, basically what I can do now is if I come back to my web app, I can again just mount this Azure file share as a local network mount for my web app. I mean, I can just give it a name like some file share. I can make a choice of the storage account that I want. And then what it does, it lists all the file shares which I have created within this storage account. Now remember, for Windows applications on App Service, basically my mount path would always start with /mount. So I need to give this mount path a name like /mounts slash maybe my file mount, whatever name I want. I can even declare it as a deployment slot setting if I need. So what I did, I basically created a storage mount. Oops. So what I created a storage mount, and additionally, now you can also create a virtual directory pointing to this storage mount. So if you look here, what I've done is I basically created a virtual path /images pointing to the physical path for my web application, which is /mount/web image. And if I want to verify this, I can just go to kudu. I can go to a command shell. And if you see file mount that I created. Now, what that means is basically I can go to my web app and I can now browse an image. Now, this is basically how I'm actually loading all my static content onto the web application, the demo web application that I'm showing here. So this is how, if you see, I have an Azure file share, which I mounted as a local mount for my web application, local file share for my web application. And I've then gone ahead and created a virtual directory pointing to this physical path now, which is again in turn pointing to an Azure file share. So that's how the entire thing works end to end. Now, it's not that I only can upload content manually. I can even access the virtual directory programmatically. So if I just show you a simple piece of code, this is how you pretty much upload or download files from your web applications, and that is still the same piece of code that you can use with virtual directories when you deploy your web applications to Azure App Service. So you see, I'm still doing server.map path slash images. So I mean, pretty much without making much changes, I mean, I'm having the same functionalities available for my web application even within Azure App Service. Now, moving on to some other great options when it comes to modernizing your web applications. The other important thing I want to talk about is logs. Now, the way you look at logs is, what if I want to look at the antivirus audit logs for my web applications, or I want to look at the console logs or the app log itself. Basically, you start by creating a new diagnostic setting. And what I do here, the diagnostic setting is I first make a choice of which logs I want to capture for my application. So I basically went ahead and chose all the logs which are available for my web application and even the metrics. And then you have the option to either send these logs to a log analytics workspace. So I had a log analytics workspace created, so I configured that, or you can archive these logs to a storage account. You can stream them to an event hub, or you can send them to a partner solution. So again, it depends how you want to consume the logs which are generated by your web application, but we provide you many different options to do that. Now, because I already created the diagnostic setting, I can go ahead and look at some of the logs which are generated by my web application. So moment this loads, yes. And once you click on logs, basically we have some of the queries which are already defined for you. I mean, you can always write your own queries as well. I just want some of app logs for my web application. And what this query does, it's basically going to give me a bar chart of app log severities over a period of time. So let's give it a few seconds. Okay, we'll move on to the next option. I also want to show you something super exciting that we are working on and should be available in next few weeks. So as you guys are aware that when it comes to app service in terms of scaling, we provide you many different options, right? Like you could do a manual scaling by just drag of a slider, or we already have the existing capability of what we call as auto scale, which is like a rule based scaling engine. So you could either set up like a timer based schedule. Like I can say that I want my web application to be running on extra instances, or maybe during the daytime, and I want to like scale in during the evening time, and I expect that my application will not be under load conditions. So in addition to that, we are also working on enabling a brand new scaling capability for our web applications, and we are calling it automatic scaling. Now, the big difference between the automatic scaling and the existing auto scale is that in automatic scaling, you really don't need to define any rules per se. What you just need to define is you need to define that for my app service plan, because remember, an app service plan is basically a logical construct which gives you the underlying infrastructure and features for your web application, and you could deploy multiple web application to a single app service plan. So what I define is I basically say that my app service plan at maximum can scale up to n number of instances. Now, for my premium plans, I can maximum in app service, I can go up to is 30. So I can say that my app service plan under load conditions can scale up to 30. In addition to that, I can also define how many always ready or warm instances I want available for this specific app. Now, again, this setting can be different for different apps. So if you see here, I am saying one, I can drag the slider, and what this means now is that at all times I will have at least 4 always ready or warm instances available for this web application. If I want, I can also say that although my app service plan can scale to 30, but I still want this individual web application to only scale up to 4, so that I don't get into bottlenecks behind the scene, maybe with my database or stuff. Now, quickly to test out this, let's go ahead and run a load test against this application. Maybe I'm running just a fifth one. I'll run the load, and it will take few seconds before the test starts to run. You can see here that I have hooked on my web application to App Insights. And right now, I only have one server online. Once the test starts to run and you experience load on this web application, you will actually see the number of servers which I already had defined as 4. If I discard the changes, I already had the app scale limit as 4 and the maximum burst for my plan as 5. You should see the number go up to 4. I will just wait for this test to start. Yes. So the test is configured. It's a load test. It's just starting to execute. And if you see, the number went up from 1 to 2. It's now 3 servers. And shortly it will go up to 4. But it won't go beyond 4 for the simple reason that I said I just want to go up to 4. I can go up to 5 because the maximum burst for the app is 5. For the app service plan is 5. Now, if you see with this kind of a scaling option, I can basically take an existing .NET web application, migrate it to app service, and configure automatic scaling, which I simply put as like, a cruise mode scaling for your web applications. I hope you guys enjoyed the different modernization capabilities that I just showcased. And I'm almost at time. So any questions, Haley?
No, we just have a couple comments on great presentation from, I think, your twin here, who almost has the exact same name. Thank you so much. This was awesome.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks.
Yeah,
Bye.
you as well. Bye now.